This is probably the greatest backdrop I've ever done an introduction on a video to. But as you can tell, I am still in Australia. I've been in Australia now, I think 2 months, maybe 2 months. And I'm still kind of finding my feet, like training is still evolving. I'm still not necessarily training for anything. Still looking after my shoulder as well. So it's been months after surgery. I cover this in my new book. I'll put a link below so you can pre-order. I think it's important to state as well. It's gonna be really cool today because you're gonna go find some stuff out about prehab, rehab, shoulder injuries and everything like that. But I put a lot of the teachings in my books. Reason being, you can just fully reference it. You can make sure that you speak to all of the relevant experts. It's science backed as well. Whereas sometimes with me just kind of waffling on like this, I might give misinformation. I don't ever want to do that. So you'll see some really cool stuff today, but equally, like I said, I urge you to pre-order the book, The Blueprint, which is out later this year. With all of that said, I talk quite a lot. I'm aware of this. I like the sound of my own voice. But I'm going to keep quite quiet today. That is because I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Jono Freeman, absolute physio legend. Also as well, he's probably going to correct me, but he was Grand Chief Jedi Master Physio for the Olympic Chinese swimming team. That might not be the official title. It was something like that. So it's just so good that since I've come back out here now, I can quiz him about shoulder rehab, prehab, and just make sure that if somebody turned around to me and said, Ross, you need to put your goggles on and your trunks and go and swim for that higher purpose, a charity, a cause, which I've always said, then I would be ready. So I'm gonna catch up with Jono. Probably gonna do a strength session afterwards as well. I might do a little bit of back. But I think what's gonna be really cool today is this is almost strength training for endurance athletes. That's kind of the theme, the title. And usually when you think of strength training, you think, squat, bench, deadlift, bicep curls. And while there probably will be some bicep curls as well, it's more getting people to think slightly differently about strength training, rehab, prehab, and mechanotransduction. If that doesn't make sense now, it will by the end of the video. I mean, Jono, I've never been renowned for my mobility, have I?
Not for the time that I've known you, no, Ross. Talk us through your injury, mate, and what happened.
Yeah, so basically it was stress fracture. So it was like essentially AC joint, not very happy, had to go in, shave some of the bone to make it a little bit more mobile, so a little bit of cartilage repair as well. Mm-hmm. Apparently I've been nursing it for a while. I was like, am I injured? They were like, you're not injured, you're just an idiot who swam around Great Britain. And I was like, fair enough. So this one, right shoulder, believe it or not, because that was either a jellyfish or it was an ice swim, and so that's my good shoulder.
That's just a jellyfish, huh? Sure.
So believe it or not, with scars, that's my good one with mobility there. Whereas this one, you can see it still doesn't want to move all that much.
And so when we're talking about swimming and understanding the importance of full range of motion for your shoulders as you're swimming, obviously that external rotation and then internal rotation, that pulling power is so important, mate. So I think the first thing we have to really focus on is creating force and creating that range of motion in external position before we load.
Right.
Obviously, if we're loading things in a decreased range of motion, you're only really going to get the strength in that range of motion that your body loves.
Right.
As opposed to letting it go, opening it up, finding that new range of motion, and then stabilizing. So I'll show you a few things that we can do around end range activations, end range or isometrics, and then coupling that with some movement, some really good movement quality exercises that sort of stimulate a swimming motion.
Oh wow, so it's all real sport specific.
Very much so, mate.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I think when people sort of think about physio, they kind of think like, massaging and kind of like stretching and a bit of mobility, but it's like, no, get in there, generate force.
So I have a really strong focus on exercise-based rehabilitation. It's because it's about, as you mentioned earlier, mechanotransduction, which is essentially forces. So our body responds to stresses and strains in the body, which is just like any type of building, essentially. Like the engineering of a building is very similar to our body. So the more force production that we're creating within our body, and the bigger the capacity the body has to resist force, obviously the more resilient your body is going to be. So it's all about creating force, and that's essentially what massage does, is it helps create lengthening force or shortening force.
Cool. And it's like you said as well, people always think in terms of like the body responding to stress, stimuli and force in terms of like muscles, you know, that's how your biceps get bigger. But I love what you just said there, because it's not as simple as that. With mechanical transduction, it's ligaments, tendons, it's everything. Everything will respond to force.
It's so true, mate. And I think one of the biggest things is capacity and understanding capacity, because if we take a passive approach to an active problem, we're not building the capacity that the activity needs. You know, for you to swim around Great Britain, you need a certain amount of capacity from multiple systems in your body, right? And it's no different when you're talking about the engineering of a shoulder, is that if you want to be able to throw a ball a long way really fast, then you need to understand that the shoulder needs to go into the full range of motion, external rotation, full range of motion of eccentric external rotators to control when that ball lets go, to have the capacity to be able to achieve that goal. And that's what I think is super important to understand, is the rehabilitation process is essentially a 4-step process working into basic strength and conditioning principles.
Sweet. So with that said, what we're going to do first? You're going to poke and prod me?
Let's do it. Shortening force, lengthening force. And when you're talking about, you know, people who sit for long periods of time, they just create shortening force here.
Right,
so
the posture. Yeah.
You increase shortening force there and lengthening force there to fix it.
Right.
You know, and that, you know, I think so much of us get caught up in the world of stretch, when an eccentric contraction is a muscle contraction. It's essentially a stretch, which is why proper strength training through full range of motion.
That's what you were saying, wasn't it? I love that term, like form follows function. So it's like, you know, your body, the muscles, ligaments, tendons, like musculoskeletal system as a whole will just start to take the shape of what you're constantly doing. And then those people, I suppose, like, you know, sat at a desk and stuff like that all day, and then they wonder why they've got back problems, neck problems.
Push down. And again, push down.
Oh, you did this before. Explain what you're doing here.
It's just basically isometric end range. So what we're doing is putting your shoulder in a comfortable position, that are comfortable being safe. So your shoulder feels safe in this position. And then just teaching it to applying force. Teaching it to stabilize at this end range.
So this principle would apply not just for swimming, but like any sport.
Anything. Hip position, lower back position, neck position. So much. Try and rotate. Externally rotate now. Back. What we know about scar tissue is scar tissue binds based on directional force. So yeah, there is a part of your rehab process where there needs to be an immobilized position for healing to occur.
Okay.
You know, but then once that healing has occurred, then there needs to be as much active rehabilitation as possible.
Wow, okay.
Because what I was saying before is we can't just keep your rehab going in a passive direction, because there's a capacity and an activity that you want to be able to achieve with your shoulder.
So you'd say that sometimes people might be treading a little bit too delicately, you know, whereas like you can get in there and just go like, no, the body's really malleable, like force it. Don't overdo it. There's a fine line, obviously, but you can force it, and that, like I said, that connected to scar tissue, like everything, just to go, come on, get up off the couch, stop being so lazy. Yeah.
For sure. I think the pressure that's applied in terms of stress and strain and force, there needs to be an understanding of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system as well. So people's feelings around force application can trigger some, you know, real sympathetic responses where it is a fight response, which is obviously not what you want. But, you know, someone swum around Great Britain, I can create a little bit more force than I need to. It's all about how you distribute force within your body. So if you think of a spider web that never breaks, and you're pulling and prodding different parts of the spider web, it's creating a force this way, and then a force that way, and a force that way. And obviously within our body we want to try and drive capacities into where that force production or pull is happening. And it starts with, you know, manual therapy, and then reactivation of certain things, which is, like we were saying here, this end range activation, and then it happens with, you know, like strength, so like almost static strength, and then moving into sort of high velocity stuff, which is plyometric stuff, and then basic, as I say, basic strength and conditioning principles applied. The long head of the tricep, the only part of the tricep that actually attaches onto the scapula. So where that sort of septum is there's about 3 or 4 muscles that sort of conjoin. And like, mate, the stickier that area gets. You right, buddy?
Yeah. I laughed to stop the tears.
Yeah, you know, the more of like how much congestion happens in here, the harder it will be to raise your arm up overhead.
Right.
Yeah. Using that. Did you do any of that overhead holds? Those overhead holds?
Yeah.
There, and then here. So, a progression to this, mate, is obviously focusing on when one hand's out, you're pressing down into the water, and obviously that pull push.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is just sort of simulate that on the land.
Yep.
You're going to go hand down, so push, and then pivot through there, rotate towards me, get your head going a little bit more over that right shoulder. Awesome, mate, good. Try and keep those angles of the elbow in a similar fashion to if you're pulling down
to
through
the
your
pull
body.
phase, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Nice. You can even progress this by holding for longer at the top. So hold, 2, 1, good, mate, back down. Awesome. Beautiful. And that's what we have to make sure that we focus on, because when that left arm goes forward and that thoracic rotation to the right, and that it's a multi-segmental rotation essentially in the water, and then that pull, because that's going to, it's just a kinetic chain effect, right?
Yeah.
So it's making sure that we maximize efficiency in your pull from not just your shoulder and elbow and wrist, but from your rotation, your thoracic spine.
That right is so much stronger there.
Oh, for sure.
Like you can just, I just hold that.
Yep. Just right in through the serratus here on this right hand side.
Yeah, and that's where we were talking about before. Asymmetry isn't necessarily a bad thing in sport, but with this, that could manifest itself in an injury if it was, over 100 days swimming and all of a sudden,
I think instead of looking at it as a bad thing or a good thing, just think about it in efficiency. So if you were to make the strength of what you want to be able to exert in a swimming motion more efficient, you want to incorporate or recruit as many muscles in that pull-push motion as you can, right?
Yeah.
And that involves having enough thoracic mobility. So it's more about talking about efficiency and understanding efficiency.
Sweet. Okay, so I'll smash that for a week, 2 weeks, revisit you, and then be like, smack on the left, smack.
There's a lot of focus always on eccentric and concentric exercises with the bands and shoulder rotator cuff stuff, which is super important. But when you're trying to get range of motion, teaching end range isometrics is a really easy way to sort of cheat your way to get more range of motion. For sure.
So boom, end range, weakest point, getting strong there.
Perfect.
Bang, concentric, eccentric.
Awesome. The focus here too is just making sure pelvis position, thoracic spine, neck position, there's no sort of twisting, hyperextension through the lumbar spine, just true glenohumeral joint external rotation or shoulder joint external rotation.
Cool, and as this gets stronger, just a bit more resistance,
a little bit more resistance, and then from here we'd probably go into a little bit more velocity stuff, so a bit more dynamic work.
Cool, okay, so isometric means the muscle is in contraction, but it's kind of not shortening or lengthening, it's just kind of holding.
And the joint's not moving. Yep.
Static, bang. The progression would be medicine balls.
Medicine balls, or as you say, eccentric and concentric actual band work with the humerus abducted at 90 degrees or the shoulder abducted at 90 degrees.
Amazing. Okay, we are now going to start throwing some weight around. Okay, so the reason I like to do this is just because, for me, this makes sense. I'm going to run this by Jono, but this is how I like to think about it. So with your shoulder, think of it almost like a tree. Okay, bear with me, this is going somewhere. And the root of the tree is almost the lats, the rhomboids, the lower trapezius, all of these big muscles in the back. Whereas like the arm itself is almost just like the branch. So the branch is never going to be strong unless the root of the tree is strengthened. So all the delt raises in the world aren't going to strengthen the branch because the root isn't very strong.
Perfect, mate. Perfect. Perfect.
Done. So with that said, what we're going to do, nice functional, just sled pulls, just making sure, bang, unilateral, pulling, serrapa, everything, pulling from the back, lower rhomboids, trapezius, lats. Then I'm not going to lie, we might just go and train biceps. Highly decorated. Yes, yes. Good. There you go. Yes, there you go. Okay, for all of the talk of mechanotransduction, physio prehab, rehab, we're now just going to train biceps because, Jono, can I think of a scientific reason?
No.
Just training by just big old dirty bicep throwdown for no apparent reason other than because it's biceps. Alright guys, that is it. Do you know what? I hope you've liked this. This was a little bit different. So like I said, strength-based prehab and rehab. So if you like it, subscribe to the channel, leave comments. If you've got any questions for Jono, we'll try our best to answer them on another video. And hopefully if you do like this, it can be like a little sort of mini series as you look at my kind of injured, ailing body and we try to actually get it back to the level of fitness that it was around the GB swim. So thank you for watching. That was mechanotransduction with Jono Freeman.